Hello and welcome to Wholesome Conversations with Holistic Edu. As promised, today we have someone with us who's very special to me. It's someone I look upon as a personal mentor. It's someone who I feel is doing amazing work in education. Indra Vijay Sinha is the founder of Purna Learning Center, an alternative school which is inclusive, integrated, and very holistic. So today we're going to talk to Indra about the practices at Purna Learning Center which are helping to integrate learning. So let me welcome her.
Yeah.
Hello.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I've been, and a lot of people were very excited when I put the conversation poster up to know that you're going to be here for a
Uh-huh.
conversation.
Nice. Yeah. Nice to know.
So,
Yeah.
you have a lot of students who are really big fans and we're just waiting to, hear you talk. So I'm so happy to have you. Uh,
Yeah.
So, Indra, when we visited Pune as part of Bhumi's, when we had one of our sessions there, and then I came and interned over there. The amount of freedom I've seen at your space at Pune, it's amazing. The way the kids are always running around. I remember thinking it almost looks like recess, but there is so much but it's amazing the freedom that's there and yet the amount of rigor that's there in every child. So I would like to know more about that. What was your vision when you first started Purna, and what sort of a space had you envisioned for the children?
Well, it was many years ago, and yes, I should say I am now less directly involved with children, more step back, more or less retired, and I'm work like to think of myself as a mentor, but I'm still, and the vision is the same that children um, need to grow up as children, and learning is part of what should happen as naturally, as joyfully, and it is best if it is self-directed. I think as teachers, we need to mm, sort of encourage the learning to happen. We could also guide the learning. We could, help the children, point them in certain directions, make them excited, curious, and so on. So that's the vision, and also the holistic part, right? So a child is not just someone to learn facts or intellectual thing. You respect the being of the child, which means the mind, the body, the spirit, to put it very simply. So that's, I think, the main reason. And I found that schools are very concerned with the very narrow, band of learning, and also even that learning is examined in an even more narrower way, and that has been. I think it's changing now. A lot of us have been trying different experiments. People are, thinking about it. So yeah, that's right. And
See,
I, frankly, very, very inspired by Rabindranath Tagore's story, the parrot story, Tota Kahini. I would encourage all of you to look that story up. So it's a very simple but charming story. And basically saying that, the bird, putting a child in a school is like putting a bird in a cage. Yeah.
right. Yeah, I remember reading this. I think Pratham also made a small, an illustrated children's book of this story, and
Hmm.
they had this parrot in a cage, and all the king and all the ministers skipping on trying to cram notes into it, and
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
right. It was a beautiful example, and it really made me think. I think it really made a lot of us think about what is education to us. In fact, this was one of the questions you had posed to us at Bhumi. What is education to you? I'd like
Hmm.
to pose the question then back to you. What is education to you?
Yeah.
What is your view of?
Oh, I mean, that can have many dimensions. But
Hmm.
yeah, so I would like to sort of say that education is involves a deliberate process, unlike learning, which can happen, which is kind of part of, even small puppies, creatures learn. Just a minute, I need
Yeah,
to answer the door. Yeah,
sure.
sorry.
No problem. While Indra ma'am comes back, I would ask all the viewers to put in your questions. We will try and take as many questions as possible. Anything you want to know about integrated learning, anything you want to know about Purna Learning Center, or just about how we can make learning more joyful.
Yeah.
If you can put your questions in the Facebook comments, we will try and answer them when Indra is back with us.
Yeah, sorry. That was
Yeah,
my
that's
little granddaughter who I am babysitting at the moment. She needs permission to stay longer and play with her friends.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, so on the sorry if there are some questions I heard you ask, but
Yeah.
I'll please say that learning happens in all sorts of ways, and learning is in some ways intrinsic to our existence, right? However,
Hmm.
when we say education, I think there is an understanding that it is a little more planned, to even some extent premeditated. Human societies have culture, right? And the culture of a society has to be passed on. By culture, I
Hmm.
mean the ways of being, right? And
Right.
most societies, I mean, schools are relatively recent. Only, schooling is
Few
less
hundred.
than 200 years old or so. But cultures across the world have different ways of passing on what they consider as important learning to the next generation. And I think that is a, gr- that is what education is fundamentally. It's a more deliberate sort of process, and
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. Hmm.
A more deliberate process of passing information from one generation to another or
I
another.
wouldn't say passing information. In fact, information is not the key thing, but
Okay.
passing ways of living, of understanding, of thinking about ourselves, of our society, about what is right, what is wrong, all that. Culture is a
Hmm.
very big umbrella word and very hard to define actually.
Right.
But yeah, it's not just passing information. Passing information is a small part of it. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay. So, which brings me to another topic that this actually came from the session that you took for us at Bhumi on holistic science, and that was the first time I even heard of that as a term, holistic
Mm,
science.
mm,
So, and this is a term that I still have not fully been able to explain to anyone. What is holistic science, and why should educators in schools take more of a holistic approach towards science?
mm. Yeah, actually, frankly, I would also be hard put to give you a definition, so I'm not even going to try. And it was only the challenge of taking your class, and I think I've taken a few more sessions with other groups at Bhumi, that it helped me concretize this notion of holistic science. But also Sita from Bhumi College and others. I was at a discourse where they said that Goethe, the German philosopher, actually talks about this. But for me, very simply, it means that science, although modern science in particular has a kind of linear trajectory, even that is changing. But when we say holistic science, it is to somehow integrate it with our own lived experiences and not just disconnect it from various things, right? I mean, uh, and that is also and when we teach science in school, typically it becomes still further narrowed into discipline. So how do you connect all that, right? When you're painting, for example, you can look at the painting aesthetically, you can understand mixing of palettes, you can also go further and understand pigments, you can understand light. This just, it's like a very I think closest to that now in it's people are increasingly thinking of systems approach, right? Especially in order to solve ecological problems and problems of climate change, we have to take a very large holistic view, because and then it becomes at a deeper level, it's philosophical, like what the Buddhists say, where do you separate ourselves from everything else? That's just a kind of illusion. We are not really disconnected. We like to think so, but we are not. And what happens at one part affects the whole, and vice versa. So, yeah. So
Okay.
you can see from a very simple, pragmatic way of approaching things to going into a much deeper philosophical understanding. I would say that's how I see holistic science. Yeah, yeah. Mm.
Okay. I think that's still, like you said, very hard to define or very hard to put into just a few sentences. So,
Yes.
from that, but still taking the gist of it and still saying that one, that science needs to look at, at human beings as part of the larger nature and how we can interact or we are connected to it. So, taking from that and coming to more practical project, I was reading up about the Ragi project that happened at Purna Learning Center, and I read a few newspaper articles that were there around it, and it looked like one of a kind farm to a table project where the children were completely involved. So I would like to take that as an example, and if you could share some more details about it, and how did the planning for this project, planning and implementation of this project, happen at Purna?
Yeah, I must confess that I was more an observer and encourager. So I might, if there are people in the audience who are more closely involved, please feel free to chip in. But this project really started with one of our parents, who also happened to be my colleague at Azim Premji University, where I was teaching, trying to bring in a kind of Gandhian idea into the school. See, Gandhi also talks of education addressing the head, hand, and heart, to very simply. So the idea was, what is it that we can do in a more or less, I mean, even though Purna is an alternative school, but how can we kind of make it more in line with what Gandhi is trying to say, holistic, if you like, or Naitalim approach to education. And so she said, why not one class? Actually, let us try and get them to grow ragi, right? So that's how the project got initiated. And so the class actually, we identified a plot of land. Then the children had, opportunity to even do soil testing. Then ragi seeds were got, traditional ragi seeds. They were planted along with pulse, that is tur dal, and they would go and observe. Weekly there was a time set aside when they would go and look at it, do the weeding, do all of it, and right up to harvesting. And many other teachers were so happy. Some teachers remembered their time, and one teacher actually got a recipe. So we have in Purna once a week, a cook. I mean, before these pandemic times, one class would cook for the whole school. Again, the idea is the very process of cooking and serving food and preparing food. In fact, it starts by the group which is supposed to cook go to the Sante, the market, the previous day, and buy the food. They think of the recipe and the quantity, and they make and serve and clean. So that's a sort of learning about many things. So this during the Ragi project, lot of Ragi dishes were cooked. Many different Ragi recipes were tried and cooked, and children got involved. Teachers got involved. Some parents got involved. Children learned a great deal, uh, both formally, informally, going to the field, being lazy, but observing, small things like insects. Children being and connecting it to also. So when harvest came, we had a theater teacher from Ninasam who taught them traditional harvest song, where actually you acknowledge that the squirrels and the birds and all also have a right to this ragi, because it's come from the earth, which is our common mother. I was beautiful. And also there was traditional about the daughter-in-law, mother-in-law relation in the ragi. So they learned to harvest, and so there's a whole lot of learning that happened. They also connected it in class. So it was, the rains didn't come, so there was worry. And then I said, at least we can talk to the children about how it must be. They are doing it as a project, but a farmer whose life depends on it, how would it be? Can they read about this farmer distress, what's happening, and connect it? The math teachers created some problems related to this. It didn't happen very. I think the connect to the classroom also happened. Ragi recipe book also came out of it. So I would say it's a very practical as well as a if I would say a holistic way of looking. And we have had gardening projects ever since and before this also, but this was really very intensive, and right from planting to harvesting and talking about it and learning about it. Yeah. So, yeah.
So you
Even
had a project with.
their children did, art with the roggy stalks. They harvested, they threshed, and so much of things were happening around it. Yeah, it was lovely. Yeah, and they connected with the local farmers, with the organizations that work on both farming, medicinal plant conservation. They learned a lot of things associated with agriculture. We also had kids who questioned it. I mean, kids said, why are we learning this? I don't want to be a farmer. So that gives us an opening to dialogue about who is a farmer. Why is it not good to, I mean, why don't you want to be a farmer? It was okay. It's not good or bad, right? But for them to realize that all this goes into the food, I think it's somewhere it will stay with them. Yeah.
For sure. Do you think this is then a project that can also be translated to other schools? Like picking up a ragi farm may not be something that, say, a mainstream school in a city could take up, but perhaps terrace gardening or something of that sort. What do you think could be a scalable option?
Absolutely. I think even we have been thinking, see, we were lucky that time to somehow manage a plot of land. We are not, unlike Bhumi, which has very deliberately kept and got a nice big piece of land. We don't have that luxury. So we've been thinking, children have been doing gardening, harvesting things like sweet potatoes, turmeric, a particular type of ginger, and so on and so forth. So we have set aside time for children to do gardening, and we are constantly learning, because see, that's what has happened in our curriculum. We've gone so far away from these natural things, right? So we are trying to see how to fit it into the curriculum, where to give the time, how to organize things. Whereas when it comes to teaching fractions, everything is there. There's workbook, there's this, there's help, and so on, and there's workshops to tell teachers. But something like this, which I feel is a very, very important skill, is not. We have to struggle, and it's an ongoing journey for us to see how do you do it in the classroom. But I think many schools are doing. There is another school which in Bangalore, which is a mainstream school, but those children also produce and they have do farming things. So even on the windowsill, yeah, even on the windowsill of a classroom, children can grow. Actually, even in American curriculum lessons, I've seen that children, teachers do create these kind of things. It's a very great learning opportunity for
Hmm.
everybody. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And it seems to connect quite a lot, right? I was looking through where you had lesson plans of maths where they were using the recipes to see
Yeah.
fractions and measurement. And then we had, of course, the science of seasons and when to harvest, when to sow, and soil. And there was also someone about, I think there was something about a child finding an earthworm and being very happy about it because it shows that now the soil is good and we'll have some ragi today.
Yes,
So, yeah,
yes, yeah.
that's
And
a
in fact,
lovely.
yeah, surprisingly they did the soil test, and they did a very, what would I say, mainstream agriculture, this nitrogen, potassium, NPK, right,
Phosphate.
phosphorus, and
Hmm.
they found that the levels had improved after they harvested. So there was an
Oh,
opportunity to talk about, how can soil be enriched rather than depleted. Things, yeah, which I think are actually very important skills. I would question why we have so little space in it, and why we are not giving importance.
hmm.
I think the reason is, and that, well, that's a deeper story, but the net result is, these big agri industries can easily convince us about food insecurity, whereas
Hmm.
it's not so
Actually,
impossible
does.
to grow. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, actually,
Mm.
having farming as the curriculum and weaving subjects around it would probably be then a good way
Yeah.
to.
That would be, I think, multiple options. I think schools can try out. It can be a weekly time set aside for children to do work. It could be a daily practice where, children maintain a small garden or even pots, because I know space in
Hmm.
cities is a big premium. So, but that could be a part of the daily routine. It doesn't take much time, say 10
Hmm.
minutes every day, and they can have measurements, activities, observe the plant. There's a lot of, art, science, mathematics, and even they can learn about it. Yeah, so Purna, we tried something not so intensively, but something learning from this. We've been working on a community project with children in the rural government schools which are in and around Pune. And we
Okay.
introduced some of these growing ideas, connecting it to their lessons about plants and, different types
Hmm.
of plants, leaves, and all that. Very interesting how children came up with so much of their own drawings and talking to the people in the family. So, yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's nice. So you've been able to implement it to an extent in the government schools in and around.
Yeah, I mean,
That's.
it's like, that project, by the way, is called Bija. So it's literally a Bija. So this Ragi project sowed some ideas which, sprouted in different ways and
Hmm.
can
And this is
sprout.
one of the.
Yeah, it also sprouts ideas in children's minds, I'm sure. Yeah, yeah.
For sure, for sure. So this was one of your projects, right? The Ragi project and the way it integrated learning, the way you integrated your lesson plans. I was
Yeah.
also fortunate to come at around the time when when the students were planning for the art mela in Pune. So there was a lot of um children running around to make soap, some kids running around to do theater performances. And I was
Yeah.
thinking about how this would be an excellent way of integrating and also application of knowledge. So how do you plan the art mela and how much of a role do the students play in planning this?
Um, I think it usually students are involved in planning, and interestingly, some of those ideas have now moved because we were moving towards a timetable where we wanted to keep, I think, 1 or 2 half days entirely given over to hand activities, and we had divided it and so on. Then COVID came, so now, just I think I'm telling you the forward part, and I'll go back to the question you asked. Now, my amazing teachers at the school, they have come up with trying to do these things online. So they call it skill development activity, and trying to encourage children at home to cook or weave or make things with their hands, and
Mm-hmm.
has worked very well, really, really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so coming back to the Mela, yeah, the children are involved, time is set aside. When a Mela is planned, then what can be done? So over the years, we have decided to make the Melas as eco-friendly as possible. So as many, the products should be handmade, and we also think, how do you want to price things,
Hmm.
how do you make it look aesthetic, what will what will be bought, what will be sold. We have lots of arguments about, should money be used during a mela, should it not be used. And it gives a lot of, again, a lot of opportunities. Theater is wonderful by itself. Theater itself for me can teach a lot of things, and if it leads up to a staged performance, everything from the technical aspects to the
Hmm.
practicing the language. So children who have never speak Kannada, by the time they rehearse their Kannada line in the play, they've at least started speaking some amount of Kannada. It breaks some kind of barrier. Or, I mean, for another child to speak English, it need not be any one particular language, just in the process of rehearsing. So theater can be integrated into classrooms, but
Hmm.
and we have groups which do it. Theater in education, they do it very seriously, but theater
Hmm.
itself can be a place where other things can be integrated. So this, it's
Oh,
very much possible. Yeah, yeah.
wonderful. I don't know. So you have theater in education as well as, is that like a subject that students take up
No,
optionally?
no. So we don't call it theater in education. In Purna, we
Okay.
are kind of avoid particular slots, and we keep thinking about it. But theater in education, there are many people who work in that area. It's a kind of, yeah,
Yeah.
TIE people. Yeah.
Hmm.
But I think what we do is encourage a lot of theater, not separately also for a mela or a performance, but also you can, children can be learning a story too through puppets, or act out parts of a story, or
Hmm.
do other theater activities in the class, which integrates with whatever else they are doing. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
And also, they can put up little performances to each other. This has had it's almost more than 25-year-old tradition to include
Hmm.
theater in the in classrooms. Yeah,
In the classrooms.
yeah.
So there's also a lot of maths that I saw. I remember them talking about how kids would decide to sell their products, and also when you see that no one is coming to buy it, what sort of marketing strategies do we use? Uh, that would be a brilliant opportunity for the child to also see what the real world looks like when you.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, pricing the soaps was quite a. I mean, there's math involved there, to simple everyday mathematics to decide, no, what are your input costs, what is, how much profit, what would be a fair price, or how are other soaps sold. And then there is the ethical angle, right? So you realize that soaps are hugely overpriced, and should we do that or not, and why or why not? Those are also related questions. But during Mela, the children also do a lot of mathematical games, right? So
Uh-huh.
many games involved mathematics. You don't call it mathematics, but the games are all very often mathematical. So there can be a lot of opportunity to enjoy mathematics without, math phobia.
Yeah, I know. I think you have a maths club, and that's facilitated by this amazing lady. I don't remember her name, but she's created this
Jyoti,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. Jyoti
Yeah,
Krishna, yeah.
yeah. The maths
Yeah.
club was an amazing place. I remember students knocking on the door and saying, "It's our time to come and play maths games." And
Yes, yes, yes.
was
Yeah.
this also an idea that came up from Jyoti, or was this something that Purna always wanted to have, a maths club where maths is fun?
Yeah. Math as fun, I think, is again an old idea. And Jyoti definitely is a serious mathematician, but also believes very seriously in math being fun. And in fact, she prefers the with children to do the fun part and not the serious teaching part. That's what she says. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, but we've had math in melas, and children have played around with many mathematical ideas, including tessellations and creating things, puzzles. Especially India has a long tradition of oral mathematical questions, so those can be easily, used as a game in a mela, or someone going around asking questions, and there could be some prize. Yeah, so all those ideas have been tried out in the past, and I'm just hoping that the present teachers can hear me and again think of more ideas. Yeah, yeah,
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. So,
yeah.
doing all this, in theory, of course, sounds very nice, but I'm sure there are practical challenges. So, how do the facilitators, get together and plan a curriculum like this that is integrated, where maths and science and languages are connected? How do they do their, say, curriculum planning?
Yes, so that is a very involved exercise, and we've grown quite a bit in the last 25 30 years. And so teachers meet together. There is a pre I mean, before the start of the year, there's an intensive set of discussion about how do you structure the curriculum. There is a kind of what should we say, learning objectives for every subject and every stage, roughly, but also with the understanding that it needs to be flexible. And then how do you that gives a sort of, if you can say, a skeleton. On that skeleton you can build activities, you can timetable, you can say let's do this together, let's do it this way. So a lot of brainstorming and discussion happens between teachers, ideas are exchanged. And also teachers meet, I think, at least twice a month on curriculum meetings. They could be subject wise to exchange ideas and solve problems. They could also be larger group meetings where things can be shared. Nowadays, with technology, I think a lot of sharing can happen on,
Hmm.
through,
Online.
yeah, yeah. Plans can be uploaded and discussed. So, yeah, yeah.
Right. So that's a lot about the planning, about how the facilitators plan for an integrated curriculum. I
Mhm.
was now trying to think of if there are educators listening to this, not from an alternative school, but a more mainstream school where they do already have a fixed curriculum. Like
Mm.
probably they don't have that much scope of moving around in the curriculum. But what strategies could they use to have more integrated learning in their classrooms?
Yeah. Actually, one thing is, curriculum is should be thought of not as a very rigid or fixed thing, but more as a, what should I say, um, a flexible guide.
Guideline.
Yeah, a
Hmm.
flexible guideline, right? For me, and this is my pet theory, I think many people might have heard me say this. I'd say it's like a raga, right? So in music, um, the rag basically has its aroha and avroha, right? The scale, and that, and a particular, combination which will give you the characteristic of the raga. But using that, the musician can create, different musicians can create differently, can,
Hmm.
different um, different musical compositions can be done using the same framework. So
Hmm.
it's a wonderful thing for me, to think of that, so it's not like it's totally unstructured, but the
Hmm.
structure allows you, it's almost like the spinal cord, right? The spinal
Hmm.
cord allows us certain kinds of movement. Yes, it is restrictive, but at the same
Hmm.
time, it allows us to do a thing which if our bodies had been like complete jellies like the amoeba, we wouldn't have been able to do certain things that we can do because we have this spinal, this
Spinal
framework.
cord. Hmm.
So yeah, so coming back to the curriculum, I think the best way to think of the curriculum is like a flexible, backbone, if you like, around
Hmm.
which different things can be used. So yeah, so just like your legs can be used for sitting, jumping, standing, running, doing Bharatanatyam, you can think of the curriculum like that. There is flexibility, there is room, there is, so I think people can take baby steps. Maybe the science and social science teachers can sit together and think that, some topics they can combine, some lessons can be done together. Similarly, mathematical and social studies teachers can find some ways where they can, share and think of ways. So that can be evolved instead of thinking of it as, all or none process. I think
Hmm.
small headways can be made, and then once one gets more comfortable, more and more things are possible. See that one another barrier is, so the curriculum really becomes more of an enabler, right? The other barrier
Hmm.
is the worry that, um, by doing all this, children don't learn. Actually, children learn very well, you know repeatedly. If you just teach them in that very boring textbook manner,
Hmm.
they after 2 years they have forgotten whatever you have taught them, because it's just not, they've not enjoyed it, they've not played with the ideas, they've not thought about it. In this, children will remember, oh yes, in last to last year this is what the teacher said. And I've been with my grandchild who's attending some online classes of Purna. Um, she i hear the children say, oh, I know what you're going to do, that teacher last year she did like that, and so
Hmm.
on. So there's a lot of ways in which they are able to remember, connect, relate to things, which actually makes the life of a teacher easier, rather than
Hmm.
just stuff. And we can trust the process. We can trust the process that, once there is an involvement and engagement, a lot of learning happens without this, this, uh, what should I say, unpleasant kind of
Acha.
things which
Hmm.
many of
Hmm.
us associate with school. Yeah. So it's
Right.
very possible in a mainstream school. And once teachers start doing it, I think they'll find more and more space in the curriculum. Yeah.
Hmm. And a lot of this then also gives the ownership of learning to the students, right? When you have these sort of projects where the students will start doing activities and right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you. I hope, I'm sure your teachers would definitely take it up and think of more activities, as you had said.
More.
I'm
Yeah.
also hoping that, a lot of other educators, even parents, because now, with the whole online thing that's happening and kids being so much at home, I'm also hoping parents pick up and, create experiences at home where the child sees connections to things that actually happen at home, like the maths in cooking, the science in cooking, the languages in just talking about it or reading a newspaper. So wonderful. I would like to thank you, Indra. This has been so wonderful. And if there's, someone had asked me to ask you this question about a book that you're writing. Do tell us about it.
The book I'm writing, actually, I've not started writing it, but I've always, so this goes back many years where I was homeschooling my children, and I would do a lot of the science related activities in the kitchen. And the idea came to me that the kitchen is actually a very scientific place. And whether you are talking about bacterial action or acids and bases, or whether you're talking of steam and temperature, so there's a ton of things that can be connected to what is going on in the kitchen. And I used to do it and do interesting activities. I think there was a story in one of the language books where someone heats water in a paper cup, and we actually did it, and it sparked off such a range of questions in my children. I have
Uh-huh.
my three biological children, this many years ago. Yeah,
Hmm.
so these things can, I think it's a long project of mine to write these down. Let me see, I have to start working
I
on this. Yes.
I really hope you do it because that book sounds so interesting. I'm sure people would just be lining up for it, and we would love to read it. So,
Yeah.
so
Thank
we look
you. I
forward to it.
need to get over my inertia and get moving on that. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure you will. So, with that, thank you. Thanks, Indra, for being
Thanks.
here. And we would love to have you again for more topics because I know we've not even picked up half of the insights that you have within you. So, the next time we have a conversation, I'm sure I would love to have you again.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Take
Pooja. It's
care.
been wonderful. Yes, you
It's
too.
been wonderful. Take
Yeah.
care.